Welcome, everyone, to Fantasy Basketball Trends. My name is Braxton, and this is the show where I give my thoughts on some guys that I like and some guys that I don't like over the last week. You know, the guys that I mentioned can be streamers, trade targets, or just guys to pick up and hold, while the guys that I'm not liking can range anywhere from outright drops to, somebody you need to keep a close eye on. I'm going to be honest with you. Got a little bit of a shorter episode this week. Just not a ton of smash pickups. I think coming out of this week, nobody I'm super excited about on. I do want to give honorable mentions to Colin Gillespie and Moussa Diabate, who we've talked about in previous episodes. Gillespie a couple times now, and then Diabate headlined the previous episode. Those guys are smash pickups right now. Kalkbrenner just went down. Obviously, I'm grabbing Moussa. And then Gillespie continues to trend up with the absence of Grayson Allen and Jalen Green. So also a smash pickup there for those two. And on that note, I hope you've been kind of, and not to toot my own horn here a ton, but I hope, these my picks have been kind of like resonating with you, because you look at the Ryan Rollins from the first episode. I mean, could be the pickup of the year. Derek Queen a couple episodes ago as well has turned into just an unbelievable fantasy asset. So, I do a lot of research going into these, and I'm really, unless I preface it by saying I'm not confident, I feel really good about some of these guys that I talk about. So I hope you're kind of taking it to heart. Okay, cool. So the top pickup this week for me, and I am pretty excited about him. I know I said I wasn't super excited about many people this week, but it's going to be Bilal Coulibaly. The Wizards, obviously, are bad, and I anticipate them to continue to be bad. And Coulibaly is just coming back from an injury. Did have a bit of a slow start to the season, as well as he's kind of getting his bearings over the last couple games after returning from that injury. But, they're starting to phase out guys like Chris Middleton from this offense. CJ McCollum might be slowly be able to follow suit very soon. Coulibaly technically started at point guard upon his return, although McCollum and Keyshawn George are mostly handling those point guard duties. They're playing kind of positionless basketball. But Coulibaly does have the ball in his hands. I would like to see him take more shots after his return. He's only taking about 6 or 7 each in those games since his return. The steals and blocks have been there, and the assists from that forward spot have been really nice. Dynasty owners, this is kind of what you've been waiting for. You want him to kind of take that next step, but he is showing promise and the ability to get those out of position assists. Have those defensive stats, and then if the scoring comes, that's the bonus. But when you're thinking Bilal, it's the assists and those defensive stats. Those stats give him kind of a safer floor in 9 category in formats. Earlier in November, before that injury, he had a 4-game stretch with where he took more shots and had some better stat lines, just on paper at least. He is a little bit more passive, like I said, since returning, so I'm not sure if that's by design or if just that's how these game flows have gone. But I am expecting him to settle somewhere in between those two versions, maybe taking 9 or 10 shots per game. Obviously those assists, if he can keep them around or get them to 4.5, that would be so huge for his value. I really like him as a redraft pickup right now. He's only rostered in 24% of Yahoo leagues, but he has graduated, in my opinion, beyond the streamer territory. He has too much upside to be in that elite streamer category, and is prone to popping off for some really nice stat lines at any moment. And when he does, it's going to be too late to grab him. I think somebody else will have him by that point. So definitely a grab and hold for me for Bilal. And I believe in most fantasy playoffs, the Wizards have a 5-game week. If I'm not mistaken, it's either week 20 or week 21, depending on how the platform you're using kind of segments weeks. But they do have a really nice playoff schedule. So that's something to factor in as well. If they still have some of these old guys on the team, they'll probably be resting a couple of those back-to-backs that are within that 5-game week. So not to think too much about playoffs yet, but that is something that I like to use playoff schedule, especially this early in the season, as like a tiebreak between guys. So if you're deciding between Bilal and maybe another upside guy, I would go Bilal, for that playoff schedule. All right, cool. So next is going to be Keldon Johnson. This is a bit of a boring one, but with Wembanyama down, I really like Keldon Johnson for the next couple weeks. Even before Wemby's injury, he had a couple nice stat lines. The last 2 weeks, he's ranked 124 in 9 category leagues, shooting 54%. The points and the rebounds have been awesome. He's averaging 1 steal per game. Got a really nice, safe floor. He's not going to hurt you anywhere. And he's seeing a bunch of usage in this Wemby-less Spurs offense. They are banged up, right? Dylan Harper is out, Stephon Castle is out, and that is opening up more opportunity for Keldon Johnson. He's capitalizing on that. He is a really solid redraft pickup, but also a nice lower-end dynasty pickup for contenders. A couple of years ago, Keldon was kind of all the rage. He's a very hot pickup. He has cooled off considerably since they gave him that contract, but he remains, I think, a nice, useful floor guy if you can grab him kind of at a low cost. And just to mention Champagnie here real quick, I do prefer him over Julian Champagnie just because he can do a little more than just shoot threes. Champagnie is prone to just maybe he'll knock down 3 threes, but he gets 1 rebound and nothing else. Keldon has a little bit more of a diverse skill set. He rebounds, scores, he has the ball in his hands a little bit more, while Champagnie is just kind of catch and shoot. And he's only rostered 18% on Yahoo or in Yahoo leagues. And as I mentioned, even before Wemby's injury, he had some decent games, double-digit scoring, kind of like a budget Jonathan Kuminga without the negative downsides of Kuminga, without the negative turnovers, without the negative free throw percentage. So if you like Kuminga, you should probably like Keldon Johnson as well, because I think Kuminga is one of the most over-owned and overhyped fantasy assets, period. Keldon Johnson is a little bit more of a muted version of Kuminga, I think, without the upside or downside either way, right? So a little bit more of stability there. And Keldon can still be valuable in deeper leagues, even when the Spurs get healthy, in my opinion. So go ahead and grab Keldon Johnson if you can use what he brings to the table. Next is going to be Jalen Tyson. The Cavs are, like these other 2 teams I mentioned, are banged up, and Jalen Tyson does look like he's taking a real step forward this season. Do want to shout out Andrew. He's been super high, and Mitch as well to an extent have been super high on Jalen Tyson since he was drafted by Cleveland. Sam Merrill is down. That's contributing a huge amount, I think, to the amount of touches he's getting on this offense. But I do think Tyson is the better overall player. I know they gave Sam Merrill, that 4-year contract, but Tyson is the better defender and contributes enough offensively to matter both in fantasy and in real life for the Cavs. I know Darius Garland just came back, and Jared Allen is currently banged up as well. When Allen returns, Tyson probably does move back to the bench, but earlier in the season, late October, early November, he still played solid minutes, even with those extra bodies around. Put up some really nice stat lines and got some good shot volume during those stretches. He is more of a long-term dynasty grab, but definitely a temporary redraft at minimum pickup while he's hot. Over the last month, Jalen Tyson is ranked inside the top 100, just inside, but he's shooting 51% from the field, 77% from the line, 2.3 threes, 12 points, 4.5 boards, and then 1.3 steals and 0.7 blocks. That's awesome. And then he's not turning the ball over. He's averaging under 1 turnover per game. So he's got an okay, assist to turnover ratio too. He's getting a splash of assists. He's good for 2 or 3 assists on a given night. He's not necessarily a punt assist guy. So he's getting that small assist boost without hurting me. In addition to all those the steals and the blocks, the threes are there, right? So definitely worth at minimum a flyer, I think, in redraft while he's rolling. You can drop him if he cools off. I really like him as a pickup, and dynasty managers should be ecstatic. This is kind of what you were waiting for on Tyson, a meaningful role during meaningful games. Even in games where the Cavs were super banged up last year, we didn't even see, there were some games where Tyson didn't even play a huge role in those games, right? So this is a positive step in his development. Could be a trade target. in dynasty leagues, if someone thinks Jarrett Allen coming back kind of kills his value, I don't think it will. It does look to me like he's earned a solid 24-minute per night role. Some other guys that maybe could take minutes away from him, like Lonzo Ball, is going to be probably limited all season, right? So I think he's going to kind of settle in nicely there. They're playing guys like Naquan Tomlin and Luke Travers, some rotation minutes. Some rotation minutes over the last couple games. So they're not not over the last couple games, but as of recently, with some of these injuries they've had. So they're not super deep out beyond 9 or 10 guys, right? So that's good news for Tyson and allows him to stay in the rotation even in a fully healthy Cavs scenario. So I think that's enough for real fantasy relevance. All right. Next is going to be Vince Williams. This is rounding out the guys that I'm liking right now. Obviously, and this is kind of the theme right now. And this is kind of just where pickups come from, right? The Grizzlies are insanely injured once again. Vince Williams is taking advantage, but he's flirting with a triple-double on a nightly basis over the last few, right? The percentages have not been great. Over the last month, he's shooting 37% from the field, but he is averaging, 8 points, 5 boards, 4.5 assists. The steals and blocks have been okay at, just under 1 at 0.9 for the steals. The blocks have not been there at just 0.2, but the steals have been there. Wouldn't be surprised if that ticks up a little bit more, though. We've seen him block shots in the past, and he is turning the ball over a little bit. But he did just have that 15 assist game a couple nights ago. Wouldn't say that's uncharacteristic for him, at least until Ja Morant returns. That update on Ty Jerome just came out as well. He's still 6 to 9 weeks away from returning, which puts him, sometime in January, maybe before the All-Star break. I mean, Ty Jerome is going to miss a lot of time this year. Huge window for Vince Williams to continue contributing. And when the Grizzlies, get a little bit healthier, if they get a little bit healthier, barring some kind of trade or something, maybe he drops back down to mid-teens minutes. Could be a drop then, right? But in the meantime, in redraft leagues, they need that offensive creation, and Vince is the one that's stepping up, right? He brings that defensive presence. This is why, Memphis likes him. They love having him on the floor. He has had an injury-riddled past couple seasons, but, he is settling nicely now that he's healthy again. And we've seen him do this before. This is not out of the norm for him. If he has the opportunity, he's capable. This is definitely more of an impact is greater than his 9 category ranking situation. He is ranked, 174 over the past month. Again, mostly due to those high turnovers, just over 2 per game. And that field goal percentage has not been great. Over the last 2 weeks, though, since Ja's gone down, his stats are even a little bit better. Almost 10 points, 7 boards, 6 assists, right? Kind of a Draymond Green triple single, flirting with a triple double type, without the field goal percentage there from Dre. Not that Dre has the best field goal percentage either, right? But Vince is even a little bit worse. Ton of assists coming from the forward spot, which is a huge value add on any team. For me, only rostered in 20% of Yahoo leagues. And as I mentioned, I'm really liking Vince as a pickup for at least the next 6 weeks until Ty Jerome or Scottie Pippen returns. Pippen is not close either. Curious to see how he produces with Ja back, but you kind of worry about that later. So for now, I would say grab Vince Williams and ride out the production. Here's where this is interesting, though, right? This could be a huge sell high opportunity for Vince in dynasty leagues, right? We've seen this healthy Grizzlies team not prioritize him. Cedric Coward is kind of what we hoped the role that Vince would take a couple years ago when we saw Vince doing this, right? So if you had in a dynasty league where you want to capitalize on this value, you don't need that production right now. Could be a huge opportunity if somebody is convinced that this is a full breakout for Vince. Maybe they're not super familiar with the situation in Memphis, or just think, okay, I had him a couple years ago, or saw him do this a couple years ago. This is going to be the norm again for him. Could be a huge sell high opportunity there. So something to keep in mind as well. I'm not saying to do that. It is possible. He does stick around 22, 24 minutes, even on a healthier team, that he's shown enough to do that. But is he going to get enough touches when guys like Jerome, Pippen, etc. are back? I don't know. So just something to think about there as well. All right. So moving on to the guys, I don't want to say I'm not liking this one, but I'm very cautious about him. It's Derek Lively. Very frustrated with the Mavs, as I'm sure Mavs fans are as well. I know Lively is still on a minutes restriction, right? To me, this feels like something that's going to be managed all year due to their depth at the center position, or just kind of with bigs, right? Even earlier in the season when he was healthy, he rarely cracked 20 minutes in those first 3 games. I think he did it once. Coming back now, he's still in a limited role. And this is where the cause for concern for me is. Daniel Gafford has looked pretty good. They gave Gafford all that money. Not a huge incentive to push Lively more than they need to, right? How much more than 24 minutes can he realistically get? Does he ever get to 30 minutes per game? Does not seem likely to me in their current situation. Now, before they traded for Anthony Davis, we saw Lively start to separate himself from Daniel Gafford, right? But with Anthony Davis in this lineup, we're seeing him steal a lot of those defensive stats from guys like Gafford and Derek Lively when they share the floor. There's a distinct effort to have AD play the 4, and as a result, he's taking a lot of those boards. He's blocking, or he's getting some of those opportunities to block shots that normally would be Derek Lively or Gafford, right? So the minutes crunch could get worse. Maybe they shift up AD for a few minutes per game. That's bad news for Lively and for Gafford, obviously, right? But at max, to me, they seem content splitting those center minutes right down the middle, right? There was, as I mentioned, a brief period last year where Gafford was fully in a backup role, 12 to 14 minutes per night, and then we saw Gafford really just kind of get unleashed as the season drew to a close. Obviously, I know Lively went down with that injury. Lively is kind of proving to be a little bit injury prone, so that's another aspect that I'm thinking of. This guy's 7'1", I think now, and he's getting beat up with these lower body injuries, so that's kind of playing a factor as well. And we've seen in limited minutes, Lively is not the most useful guy, right? If he's going to score, he's going to play 18 minutes, it's going to be like 6 points and 6 boards, right? Gafford is the one who can pull up these really nice stat lines in the abbreviated minutes, right? So Lively hasn't really shown the ability to do that. He's needed the high minutes to put up some nice, really nice stat lines. And then when Kyrie returns, which that'll affect the rotations even further. Obviously, there's no positional overlap there, right? But maybe they shift a couple guys up. Maybe they shift PJ to the 4. Maybe they shift Cooper Flagg to the 4, right? AD moves up a little bit for 4 or 5 minutes per game. That's directly affecting Lively. So again, just because they don't, one is a point guard and one is a center, doesn't mean Kyrie's return can't affect Lively. In Yahoo leagues, Gafford is rostered in 22%, while Lively is 64%. I would probably rather have Gafford right now and for the rest of the season, again, because of Lively's health issues. Gafford is playing well. He needs less minutes to contribute. They've got very similar fantasy outputs, but like I said, Gafford can do it in less minutes, right? The upside is not sky high for Lively unless he gets back closer to that 30 minutes per game. He's not. I'm not saying to go out and drop Lively, okay? But I want to be clear that he's not undroppable. I would not be super worried from a dynasty perspective. It looks like there is a divorce headed between the Mavs and Anthony Davis at some point within the next year or two. So long term, I think Lively is probably going to be okay. AD is really the presence of him, in addition to splitting the minutes, is kind of the main concern for me. If they're splitting the minutes down the middle, Lively can still be pretty useful, but it's that extra aspect of Anthony Davis, kind of taking some of those stats away that I'm concerned about. If I'm holding him because of his name value, or you drafted him maybe a little bit higher than the consensus, this may be a sunk cost thing. I'd be comfortable dropping him if I needed more immediate production, if I'm struggling. Even swapping him straight up for Daniel Gafford, I think is completely fine. I think he's over-owned at that 64%. and not somebody I'm super excited about the outlook on moving forward. They just have too many guys who that need touches, I guess. They're not good, right? But Cooper Flag is there now taking touches. Kyrie will be taking touches. Anthony Davis. All these guys where, he's not just a lob threat for Luka anymore, which is kind of what we were excited about as a Lively owner. So so even when he's on the floor, I know I've said this a couple times, it's possible he's out there, just not even as a fourth or a fifth option, as opposed to a third option or second option in some scenarios with Luka in those lineups. So, yeah, that'll do it for Lively. And then rounding out the list here is going to be Yves Missi. We talked about Derek Queen a couple weeks ago, as I mentioned, kind of at the top as the headliner of that episode. And as I mentioned, I really hope you grabbed him. But the flip side of Queen taking off is the impact on Yves Missi. And from a dynasty standpoint, I am very, very concerned. I was concerned the moment they made that Derek Queen pick. And, I did sell off the limited shares of Missi that I had. There's no way to spin it. This is bad for him. He's basically relegated to a full backup role and just does not seem able to play next to Queen in any capacity. There's no spacing with him and Queen on the floor, and that makes the pairing kind of, just really tough. Another worrying sign for me is Carlo Matkovic was getting minutes before he went down with an injury before a couple games ago. And when Matkovic returns, his shooting ability could easily pull minutes away from Yves Missi. So, if there's a dynasty manager that still believes in Missi or someone that's super desperate for a center in a dynasty league, I'd consider moving him because, I do actually think the situation can get worse. I think the minutes can drop further, and he has not played well when he has been on the court. Over the past couple weeks, he's shooting 46% from the field, which is obviously low for a big, and if he's not getting these high efficiency buckets, what is he doing for you? He's averaging under 1 block per game over the past couple weeks. He's not generating those defensive stats, right? The Pelicans are terrible right now, and because they don't have their pick, they have zero incentive to tank. They're going to try and win as many games as possible, and they won't hesitate to shift this rotation if Missi isn't helping, right? This is not a buy low situation by any means, I don't think. I'm not saying to go out and just dump him and sell low, right? If Missi pops off for a couple games, that could be a good chance to move him. But I am very concerned about this long-term outlook on Missi. They didn't invest big draft capital in him. He was 21st overall. They invested, hugely in Queen, traded those 2 unprotected firsts for him, and he's been unbelievable. Obviously, it's not translating to wins. I know Zion has been injured and Jordan Poole has been injured, right? This team they've kind of crafted that they thought was going to be competitive, I guess, has really not shared the floor together in a fully healthy capacity. But, the production from Missi last year was basically kind of just and not literally, but like the last man standing. So, he kind of just walked into those high minutes in those games. It's no longer the case. They also brought in Kevon Looney, who I did think was going to play a little bit bigger role than he is now because they gave him $80 million per year. But it's not happening now. But at some point, he could re-enter the rotation if they want to kind of keep that vet presence on the floor. And if Missi continues to struggle, it could be at his expense. And, that's even before factoring in the potential Zion return impact, who is out right now, right? So when Zion comes back and he's healthy again, that only complicates things further. Queen is dominating the usage. Even if Missi is on the floor, there's no touches or roll for him. He can't generate his own shot. He's a pick and roll guy. There doesn't really have a pick and roll man. It does not seem like they're super interested in getting him involved on the offensive side. A lot of his buckets are off offensive rebounds, and he just has stones for hands. So yeah, you can't really catch many passes anyway. But just major cause for concern. I'm not touching Missi in redraft. Obviously, he's only 7% owned in Yahoo leagues, but in dynasty leagues, I might be looking for an exit strategy while he still has the youth on his side and maybe some name value. So, with that, that'll do it for the buy and sell this week. Thank you guys so much for watching. Like I said, I hope that these picks help you out. I know this is going to be a shorter one, but This actually, I think this might be one of our longest ones yet. So I hope you enjoyed my thoughts, and let me know what you think. Let me know if these picks have helped you at all. And with that, I'll see you guys next week. Thanks.